Close your eyes, take one slow breath in. Let your chest rise and your belly expand, and the air fill you all the way to the bottom of your lungs, the way you breathe, when you finally have permission to breathe properly, when the day's demands have stepped back and the body remembers what it knows how to do on its own. And breathe out, long, complete, unhurried, good. Take another breath, and this time as you breathe in, imagine the air is different, cooler, thinner, carrying on it the faint smell of copal incense, a resin that burns with a clean, slightly sweet smoke, a smoke that has been drifting upward from stone temples in the Valley of Mexico for more than 2,000 years. It is the smell of ceremony, of attention, of the meeting place between the human and the divine. Breathe that in, and breathe out. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, let your hands become soft and heavy where they rest. There is nothing that requires your attention tonight, no problem waiting for you on the other side of sleep, no alarm counting down, no unfinished sentence from the day lodged in your throat. There is only this breath, and the next one, and the slow, patient darkness gathering around you like a cloak. Breathe in and out. I want to take you somewhere very old tonight, not old in the way that makes you feel distant or disconnected, but old in the way that makes you feel something clarify, something simplify. Old in the way that reminds you what things were before they became complicated. We are going to the Valley of Mexico. The year is somewhere in the 15th century, the height of the Aztec civilization, the time when the great city of Tenochtitlán rose from the surface of a lake like something dreamed into being, its temples catching the first light of dawn, its canals carrying the quiet commerce of 1,000,000 lives. But we are not going to the busiest part of the city tonight. We are going to its highest, quietest place. We are going to a temple at the edge of the city, where the stone steps rise above the noise of the markets and the smoke of the cooking fires and the ordinary beautiful din of human life, and where, at the top of those steps, a man is sitting very still in the last hour before dawn, watching the sky. His name is Tonalpouhqui, he who reads the days. He is an astronomer-priest, one of the most learned men in the most sophisticated civilization in the Americas of his time. He has been trained since childhood to read the sky the way other men read water or wind or the faces of people they love, as a text full of meaning, a document written in light and shadow and the patient movement of stars. Tonight, he has been awake since before midnight. He will not sleep until the sun is fully risen and the observations of the night have been recorded. But this is not a hardship. This is for Tonalpouhqui the closest thing to peace he knows. Let your breathing slow to his. Let your eyes grow heavy with the same weight that eventually settles on a person who has been watching the sky for hours. Not the weight of exhaustion exactly, but the weight of deep presence, of having been so fully attentive to one vast and beautiful thing for so long that the boundaries between the watcher and the watched have grown soft and uncertain. We are going to spend a day and a night in his life. From the first pale suggestion of dawn, all the way around the slow wheel of the sun, through the golden afternoon and the blue dusk, and the long, star-filled dark. A day in the life of the keeper of the night sky. Breathe in and let it begin. The sky above Tenochtitlan is doing something extraordinary. It happens every morning, and it never becomes ordinary. This is one of the things that Tonalpouhqui has understood from his years of watching. The sky does not become ordinary. The sky becomes more itself with every observation, more detailed, more layered, more full of the particular texture that only patient attention reveals. In the east, where the mountains of the Sierra Nevada rise in long, dark silhouettes against the sky, there is a change happening, a brightening that is not yet light, not yet color, but a release of darkness, a gradual transparency appearing in the air above the mountain ridge, as though the sky is slowly waking to its own self, as though it is deciding unhurriedly to become day. Tonalpouhqui has been sitting cross-legged on a mat of woven rushes at the summit of the temple platform for 3 hours. Around him, the city of Tenochtitlan sleeps. Far below, he can see the faint orange flicker of the perpetual fire that burns in the great temple complex, the fire that is never allowed to go out, not in storm or drought or the deep cold of a highland winter. It has been burning for decades, tended by priests whose only responsibility is that flame. Its light reflects in the dark water of the canals that thread through the city like the lines of a hand, connecting neighborhood to neighborhood, market to causey, the human world to the water world that surrounds it on all sides. The city was built on a lake, Lake Texcoco, a shallow, vast mirror of water and sky, set high in a mountain basin at 7,000 feet of altitude, ringed by volcanoes. The two great snow-capped peaks, Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, stand to the southeast, visible from the temple top on clear days, their slopes faintly luminous in the pre-dawn dark. From up here in this last hour before dawn, the city looks like something the lake is dreaming. The causeways that connect the island city to the mainland, long, straight, paved stone roads crossing miles of open water, catch the faint starlight and throw it back as pale lines disappearing into the dark of the lake surface. Canoes move along the canals even now at this early hour. The market boats, the Chinampa farmers bringing vegetables from their floating gardens, the fish traders from the lake shore. They move quietly, the sound of their paddling a distant rhythmic dipping, a sound that carries across water in the still pre-dawn air and reaches the temple top as something barely distinguishable from the sound of breathing. Tonalpouhqui does not look down for long, he looks up. He has been watching the transit of Venus for the past hour, the brilliant, steady light of the morning star holding its position in the eastern sky, brighter than anything else in the pre-dawn darkness, rising slowly as the night progresses. Venus is not simply a beautiful light to Tonalpouhqui. It is Tlahuizcalpantecutli, the lord of the House of Dawn, a divine presence whose movements through the sky encode messages that the well-trained reader can understand. The Aztec astronomers had been tracking Venus for generations. They knew its cycle with extraordinary precision, the 584-day synodic period, the way it alternates between morning star and evening star, the way its path across the sky traces a pattern that, over 8 years, inscribes a near-perfect 5-pointed figure against the background of the zodiacal stars. 5 appearances as morning star, 5 as evening star, 8 years. after which the whole pattern begins again, the great celestial flower redrawing itself in slow light. Tonalpouhqui has been watching this cycle for most of his adult life. He knows where Venus will be on any given morning with a precision that would seem impossible to someone who had not spent years in exactly this kind of patient, unhurried observation. He knows its colour changes, the blue-white of its coldest light in the darkest part of the night, warming toward yellow-white as it rises and the sky brightens around it. He knows the particular quality of its stillness. Unlike the planets that visibly wander against the background stars, Venus's movement is perceptible only day to day. Its nightly position nearly constant even as its monthly arc shifts slowly along the ecliptic. He has recorded tonight's position on a folded bark paper book, the Tenochtitlán, using a fine brush and black ink made from charred resin. The symbols are precise, compact, beautiful in their own way, like the ideograms of a private language that is also a universal one, a language of astronomy that transcends the boundaries of any particular civilization because it speaks about the sky, which belongs to no one. He sets the brush down, he sits with his hands resting on his knees. He breathes. The sky is beginning to change. The colour comes first to the volcanic peaks. Popocatépetl, the smoking mountain, catches the earliest light on its snow-capped summit. From this height, from this angle, you can see the change happen. A shift from blue-grey to something barely warmer, barely more golden, a change so subtle that you could miss it if you were looking directly at it. But Tonalpouhqui has learned to hold his gaze slightly to one side of the thing he is watching. He has learned that peripheral attention often sees what direct attention misses, that the eye's edge, where the light-sensitive rods are concentrated, is better for seeing faint changes and movements in low light than the center, where the colour-sensitive cones demand more illumination. He learned this about eyes the same way he learned everything, by watching for years until the watching taught him. The summit of Popocatépetl glows pale gold. Then Iztaccíhuatl, the white woman, the mountain that from certain angles resembles a reclining human form, head and shoulders, and the long slope of a body at rest, her highest points take on the same warmth. Two fire mountains, snow-covered and enormous, held in the first light of a day they have watched begin 10,000 times before. And then the sky itself begins to colour. It starts as a thin line of palest rose above the eastern ridge, the merest suggestion, a watercolour wash so faint it might be imagination. But Tonalpouhqui has learned not to second-guess these suggestions. The sky is always right. The sky is never doing something that isn't real. The rose deepens slowly to something more deliberate, a warm apricot, a true orange at the horizon line where the mountains meet the sky, fading upward through copper and gold to the still deep blue of the zenith, where the last stars are holding their positions with the quiet stubbornness of things that know they will have to yield but are not hurrying toward it. Venus remains visible. Even as the sky brightens around it, the morning star holds its light sufficient to survive the encroachment of dawn for longer than any other object in the sky. It will be the last star visible in the east when full light arrives. Tonalpouhqui watches its last minutes with something like tenderness. The great temple below him, The Templo Mayor, the double pyramid at the heart of Tenochtitlan, is oriented with one of its faces directly toward the point on the horizon where the sun rises at the spring equinox. This orientation is not coincidence. Nothing in the layout of this city is coincidence. The architects who designed Tenochtitlan and the priests who directed those architects understood the sky as an active participant in the city's life, not background, not decoration, but structural, fundamental, as load-bearing in their cosmological understanding as stone is in their physical buildings. The city is oriented to the sky. The temples are calibrated to specific celestial events. The canals that move water through the city follow lines that also encode astronomical alignments, at least in part. To live in Tenochtitlan was to live inside an astronomical instrument, a city-scale mechanism for reading the sky, built with the collective labor of thousands and maintained with the ongoing attention of people like Tonalpouhqui, whose job it was to ensure that the instrument remained calibrated, that the world remained in balance, that the sun continued to rise. He watches the sun now as its first edge appears above the mountains, and he feels, as he always feels at this moment, regardless of how many thousand times he has watched it, a particular kind of relief. Not the relief of surprise, he was confident as always that it would come, but the relief of confirmation, of the universe keeping its own word. The sun rose, the world continues. He bows his head, just briefly, just slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. "Thank you," he says to the light, not loudly, not in ceremony, just in the private shorthand of a person who has been in conversation with the sky for so long that formality has dissolved into something more direct. Thank you. The sun rises over Tenochtitlan, and below the temple, the city begins to wake. There is a particular quality to the air in the moments after sunrise at high altitude. The night has left it clean and cold. The lake's moisture has condensed during the dark hours and settled as faint dew on every surface, and now the rising sun begins to warm that moisture back into vapor, and the air above the water and the causeways and the chinampas rises in faint shimmer, not quite mist, not quite nothing, somewhere between the two. A transparency, a quality of the air that makes distant things look slightly soft at their edges, as though the world is still deciding exactly what shape it will take today. Tonalpouhqui descends the temple steps slowly. The stone steps of Aztec temples are steep. This is intentional. The steep angle makes the descent from the summit visible from a great distance, adds to the drama of the priest's movement between the upper world and the lower, encodes in the architecture the enormous vertical distance between the earth and the sky. Each step requires deliberate placement of the foot, attention, the body's full presence. Tonalpouhqui has descended these steps thousands of times. He places each foot with the same care he always does. At the base of the temple, the world is warm with new light. The great plaza that surrounds the Templo Mayor complex is beginning to fill, slowly, softly, with the first people of the morning. Priests from the adjacent temples making their own way toward their duties. Servants carrying water in clay vessels balanced on their heads, their posture perfectly upright, their feet finding the smooth paving stones without looking. A group of young students from the Kalmakak, the temple school, following a senior priest in single file across the far side of the plaza, their white cloaks still bright in the new morning. The Tonalpouhqui. It was here, in this school, that Tonalpouhqui spent the first 15 years of his training. He was selected as a child, chosen partly for his intelligence, partly for something harder to name that his early teachers had recognized in him, a quality of patience, of willingness to wait, of comfort in stillness and silence that most children have to learn, and that he seemed to have arrived with. He had been, even as a young boy, someone who would sit for long periods simply watching things, watching water move, watching light change, watching the small, slow transformations that impatient people miss. His teachers recognized this quality and named it. He would be a Tonalpouhqui, a reader of days, a keeper of the sacred calendar, a watcher of the sky, a person whose patience would be the empire's instrument for knowing where it stood in time. In the Tonalpouhqui, the training was long and demanding and, for the right person, deeply satisfying. He learned the two sacred calendars, the Tonalpouhqui, the 260-day ritual calendar that governed ceremony and fate, and the interpretation of every day as an occasion with its own divine character, and the Tonalpouhqui, the 365-day solar calendar that governed the agricultural cycle, the festivals of the year, the planting and the harvest and the seasons. He learned how these two calendars meshed together, how their combination produced a 52-year cycle, the calendar round, at the end of which every possible combination of day names from both calendars had occurred exactly once, and the cycle began again. The end of a calendar round was a moment of great cosmic significance. The old cycle had completed, the new one had not yet begun, and for a night the world held its breath. All fires were extinguished, all lights put out. The city waited in complete darkness, and then the priests ascended the hill of the star. And if the Pleiades, that small, distinctive cluster of stars that the Aztec called Tenochtitlan, the marketplace, crossed the zenith at midnight without any sign of cosmic disruption, the world had been permitted to continue. A new fire was kindled on the chest of a sacrificed captive. Runners carried that fire back to Tenochtitlan, and from the new flame, every household fire in the city was relit. A new 52-year cycle began. Tonalpouhqui had witnessed this ceremony twice in his life. The second time, he had been the one to light the new fire. He carries that memory the way he carries all his significant memories, not in the front of his mind, where it crowds the present, but settled deeply, available, a warmth at the base of everything he does. He crosses the plaza now in the mild morning light, moving toward the priestly quarters, where he will wash and eat a small meal, and rest for a few hours before the day's teaching obligations begin. The copal smoke from the morning's first offering drifts across the plaza, sweet, clean, familiar as breathing. He walks through it, and it closes behind him like water. The rooms where the priests of the astronomical college live are simple. Stone walls thick enough to keep the highland cold at bay, plastered with white lime that the morning light turns a warm cream colour. The floor is swept stone, covered in places with woven reed mats. A single window in each room, framed in the characteristic trapezoidal shape of Mesoamerican architecture, wider at the bottom than the top, faces the inner courtyard where a fountain plays from a stone basin. The sound of the fountain is continuous. It is the sound that Tonalpouhqui wakes to when he wakes here, and the sound that accompanies his rest. Water brought from the mountains springs through the great aqueducts that carry fresh water into the island city from the mainland. The great hydraulic achievement of Aztec engineering, the reason that a city of hundreds of thousands could exist on the surface of a lake without succumbing to thirst. The water runs through clay pipes into stone basins distributed throughout the temple complex, and from the basins into the small fountains of the courtyards, and the sound of it is always present, a soft, continuous voice. Tonalpouhqui removes his sandals at the door. He sets his amoxtli, the bark paper observation book, carefully on the reed shelf where the night's records are stored beside the other books. The older observations, the tables of planetary positions accumulated over years, the records of eclipses and conjunctions, and the rare, significant appearances of comets. His shelves hold decades of the sky in them, folded into bark paper, written in the compact script of astronomical notation. He sits beside the basin in his room and washes his face and hands with the cool water. The water is very cold at this hour. It comes from the snow on the mountains, carried through stone pipes that maintain its temperature until it arrives here. Against his face, the cold is startling in the best way, a clarification, a gentle shock that marks the transition from the long watching of the night to the beginning of the day's ordinary life. He dries his face with a cloth of white cotton. Breakfast arrives, brought by one of the temple servants, a young man who has been making this walk to Tonalpouhqui's door for 3 years, and who knows that the astronomer-priest takes his morning meal with the same quiet attention he gives to everything. The servant sets the food down without speaking, bows slightly, and withdraws. The meal is simple. A clay bowl of atole, a warm, thick drink made from ground corn, smooth and slightly sweet, with a faint earthiness that the corn retains even after grinding. It is warming in a way that goes beyond temperature, the way of foods that have nourished people in a particular place for so long that the nourishment has become cultural as well as nutritional. Beside it, a small stack of talaxcali, the thin corn flatbread, still warm, soft, and slightly charred at the edges from the griddle, and a clay cup of water, cold and clear. He eats slowly, not because he's thinking of something else, because the food deserves attention. The corn in the atole was grown on the chinampas, the floating gardens of the lake, a system of agriculture as ingenious as the Inca terraces, built from alternating layers of lake mud and vegetation that create rich, deep beds of soil above the water surface, irrigated by the lake itself, extraordinarily productive. The hands that grew it, carried it, ground it, and cooked it are part of the web of reciprocal obligation and collective life that the city runs on. To eat without attention would be a kind of ingratitude. Tonalpouhqui is not an inattentive person. He finishes the atole. He folds the last flatbread and eats it. He drinks the water. He stretches out on his sleeping mat, pulls a cotton blanket over himself, and closes his eyes. Within minutes, he is asleep. His sleep is the sleep of a person whose body and mind have been in complete alignment for a long time, a deep, structureless rest that contains no anxiety, no half-solved problem pulling at the surface of consciousness. He has learned, over decades of night work and day rest, to sleep completely when sleep is available, the way a canoe pulled up on the shore, is completely at rest, not waiting, not watchful, just still. He sleeps for 4 hours. When he wakes, the sun is high. The midday light in the Valley of Mexico is extraordinary. At 7,000 feet of altitude, with the thin, clear air of the highland plateau, the sun at its zenith has an intensity and directness that the lowland sun never quite achieves. The shadows are sharp-edged and deep. The light on white plastered walls is almost painful in its brightness. The lake surface, visible from the temple heights, becomes a mirror of pure silver, reflecting the sky back at itself with a fidelity that blurs the horizon line between water and air. Tonalpouhqui teaches in the afternoon shade. His students, 8 of them, young men between 12 and 16, all students of the Calmecac in their 3rd or 4th year of astronomical training, sit in a semicircle on the paved floor of the shaded colonnade that borders the inner courtyard. They sit straight-backed, attentive, their observation books open on their laps, their brushes and ink pots beside them. They have been watching the sky from these courtyards for 2 years. But there is a difference between looking and seeing, and Tonalpouhqui's work is to teach them the difference. Today, he is teaching the Tonalpouhqui, the 260-day sacred calendar. The Tonalpouhqui is perhaps the most elegant intellectual achievement of Mesoamerican civilization. It is a calendar constructed from the intersection of 2 independent cycles. A cycle of 20 named days, each with its own divine character and associations, and a cycle of 13 numbers. The 20-day names and the 13 numbers combine in sequence 1 crocodile, 2 wind, 3 house, 4 lizard, and so on. And since 20 and 13 share no common factor, the combination produces 260 unique day names before the cycle repeats. 260 days, the approximate length of the human gestation period, the approximate length of the agricultural growing season in central Mexico, the interval between certain planetary conjunctions. Whether these correspondences were the origin of the calendar's design or discovered after the fact, scholars have not agreed, and Tonalpouhqui himself, when pressed by his students on this question, gives the answer he believes. Both. The calendar was designed by people who were paying very close attention to everything, and when you pay that kind of attention, correspondences accumulate. The world is more coherent than it appears, he tells his students. Your job is to learn to see the coherence. He sits before them now, cross-legged, his teaching amoxtli unfolded across his knees, a large, beautifully painted bark paper book that shows the full 260-day calendar in its grid of 20 columns and 13 rows, each day name illustrated with its associated deity, its color, its direction in the sacred geography of the cosmos. He asks the student nearest to him, a serious, thin-faced boy named Itzli, to name the patron deity of today's day sign. Itzli does not hesitate. He has memorized the patron deities of all 20 day signs, a task that took him 3 months of daily repetition. He names the deity correctly, gives its domain, its color, its direction. Tonalpouhqui nods. Good, he says. Now tell me what today's number means in context with that sign. This is harder. This requires not just memory but interpretation, the skill of reading the combination, of understanding how the 13 numbers modulate the 20 names, the way a musical key modulates a melody. Itzli thinks for a moment. His brush rests against his lower lip, a habit Tonalpouhqui has not corrected, because he recognizes in it the physical gesture of genuine thought, the student's mind actually working. Then Itzli answers, and the answer is close, not perfect, but close. He has grasped the principle correctly, even if the specific interpretation could be refined. Tonalpouhqui refines it. He does not correct with criticism. He adds. He extends what Itzli has said, showing the student where his reasoning was sound and where it could go further, the way a guide might take a traveller's correct path and show them where it leads beyond the visible horizon. The other students listen. One of them, a broader-faced, dreamy-eyed boy who will one day become one of the finest astronomical observers in the valley, but who is not yet aware of this, writes something in his observation book. Not what Tonalpouhqui is saying, something of his own, some thought that has been sparked. Tonalpouhqui notices this out of the corner of his eye. He does not interrupt. This kind of tangential thinking, the student's mind going somewhere of its own initiative in response to what the teacher has offered, this is more valuable than the most accurate repetition of a lesson. He lets the boy write. He continues with the lesson. The afternoon shadows in the colonnade lengthen as they work. The light shifts from the flat brightness of noon to the more angled, warmer quality of mid-afternoon. Somewhere in the courtyard, a bird has found the rim of the fountain basin and is drinking in quick, precise dips, its head tilting back with each swallow. The sound of the water, the scratch of brushes on bark paper, the voice of the teacher, low and unhurried, unfolding the structure of time. When the teaching session ends, Tonalpouhqui walks. This is a daily practice. The afternoon walk around the perimeter of the temple precinct, sometimes extending out along the causeway toward the mainland, sometimes simply around the outer courts of the sacred complex. It is not exercise exactly, though the body benefits from the movement after the stillness of watching and teaching. It is a different kind of observation. What the sky and the instruments show at night, the walking shows at eye level. He walks along the southern edge of the great plaza. The Templo Mayor is to his right, the double pyramid that rises in its 4 step tiers toward the twin shrines at its summit, one dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the sun god of war, and one to Tlaloc, the god of rain and water and agricultural fertility. The 2 shrines represent between them the fundamental dynamic of life in the Valley of Mexico, the fierce burning energy of the sun and the soft, sustaining gift of water, heat and moisture, fire and rain, the same dynamic that governs the growing of corn, the same dynamic that governs human life. Tonalpouhqui pauses at the corner of the plaza and looks up at the temple. The steps on the western face are empty now in the afternoon heat. They will be climbed again at sunset, when the evening ceremonies begin. But now they simply rise, steep and silent and monumentally patient against the bright afternoon sky. He notices the shadow. The shadow cast by the temple at this hour of this day falls in a precise direction and at a precise length. He knows this shadow. He has watched it move through its annual cycle, knows the month and the week and almost the day from the shadow's angle and length. The architecture is an instrument and he is attuned to it. Today's shadow tells him what he already knows from the calendar. They are approaching the summer solstice. The sun's path is at its highest arc, the shadows at midday at their shortest for the year. In a few days, the solstice ceremonies will begin. He has been preparing for them for weeks. He walks on. The markets at the edge of the sacred precinct are busy in this afternoon hour. The great Tlatelolco market to the north is the largest market in the Americas. Its daily attendance estimated in the tens of thousands, its goods representing every region and product of the Aztec world. Cloth from the coast, chocolate from the lowland tropics, turquoise and jade from the mines of the north, rubber balls for the ceremonial game, dried chilies in every variety, live animals, pottery, obsidian tools, sharp as any metal, medicines and pigments and dyes, and the extraordinary featherwork for which Aztec artisans were renowned throughout Mesoamerica. Tonalpouhqui does not enter the market. He passes its edge, absorbing its noise and colour and smell, the smell of fruit and fresh corn, and the sharp edge of chili in the warm afternoon air, and then continues past it toward the quieter paths along the canal. The canals of Tenochtitlan are peaceful in the afternoon. The morning's heavy commerce has thinned. The supply boats have unloaded. The market traffic has shifted to foot. The canal is now occupied mostly by the Chinampa farmers returning home after the day's selling, their long, flat-bottomed boats sitting higher in the water now that they are empty, moving easily with each push of the pole along the canal bed. Tonalpouhqui stops on a small bridge over the canal and watches a single canoe pass beneath him. The paddler is an old woman, moving with the unhurried competence of someone who has been navigating these canals her entire life. Her boat carries a few remaining bundles of vegetables, wilted herbs, a stack of squash, and a clay pot covered with cloth, probably something for her evening meal. She does not look up as she passes beneath the bridge. Tonalpouhqui watches her until she rounds the curve of the canal and disappears behind the flowering willow that trails its branches into the water. He has a feeling he often has at moments like this: gratitude for the ordinary. The canal, the old woman, the willow, the water reflecting the afternoon light in bright ripples that travel outward from the canoe's wake and then still. He is a keeper of cosmic time. He tracks the movements of planets and the cycles of centuries. He reads the sky for signs of the universe's continued willingness to sustain itself. And nothing he has ever observed in the sky is more beautiful than this canal in the afternoon light. He stands on the bridge for a long time. He is not thinking. He is simply seeing. In the late afternoon, Tonalpouhqui returns to his room and works. Not observational work. That belongs to the night. This is the work of computation, taking the observations accumulated over weeks and months, working through the mathematics of the celestial cycles, updating the great tables that form the backbone of the astronomical college's knowledge. He sits at a low, wooden writing table. The Amoxtli books are spread around him, open at various pages, some weighted with smooth stones at their edges to prevent the bark paper from curling in the afternoon air that moves through the window. The light falls across the table at a low angle, catching the texture of the painted pages, making the glyphs stand out in slight relief. He dips his brush. He works. The mathematics of Aztec astronomy is not simple arithmetic. The celestial cycles do not resolve into whole numbers. They never do, because the universe did not design itself around human counting systems. The year is not exactly 365 days, the lunar month is not exactly 30. The synodic period of Venus is not exactly 584, though 584 is very close. The skill of the astronomer is in managing these inexactnesses, in knowing how to account for the accumulated fractional day, the small drift that grows over decades if left uncorrected, the way the calendar and the sky slowly diverge unless the corrections are made regularly and precisely. Tonalpouhqui's calculations today concern the Venus cycle. He is working on a table that will predict the heliacal rising of Venus, the first morning appearance of the planet after it has passed behind the sun and been invisible for a period, for the next several years. These predictions will be used by the priests who read the auguries of Venus for people seeking guidance on important decisions. They will be consulted for the timing of certain ceremonies. They will be given to the canal-side as teaching material. He works with the same quiet focus he brings to his sky watching, a focus that is not strained, not anxious, not competitive with itself, just present, just doing the thing. The brush moves across the bark paper, symbols accumulate, numbers flow into one another. Outside the window, the afternoon is deepening. The light coming through the trapezoidal opening has shifted from bright yellow-white to something more amber, more golden. The shadows in the courtyard have lengthened into the long diagonals of late afternoon. The fountain continues its soft conversation. A copal brazier in the corner of the room holds a curl of white smoke that drifts toward the window and exits into the still air outside. Tonalpouhqui does not look up from his work for a long time, but he is aware of all of this. The smoke, the light, the fountain, the changing quality of the air as afternoon moves toward evening in the peripheral way that long cultivated attention allows. He has learned to hold the focused and the peripheral simultaneously. The particular thing he is attending to at the center and the full world continuing at the edges, neither ignored nor allowed to crowd the center. He thinks of this as how the sky works. At the center of your gaze, one star. At the edges of your vision, thousands. Both real, both present. The skill is in not losing either. He finishes the calculation, he checks it again. The numbers agree. He sets down his brush and stretches his hands, curling and uncurling his fingers, feeling the small, pleasant ache of the tendons that have been holding the same position for an hour. He looks out of the window. The sky in the west is beginning to color. The sunset ceremonies at the temple complex are brief and beautiful. They do not require the full assembly of the priesthood, not the elaborate preparations and processions of the great festivals, but the daily acknowledgement of the sun's descent. A small group of priests gathered at the western face of the Templo Mayor, facing the horizon where the sun is completing its arc, offering copal smoke and prayers, and the continuation of the sacred fire. Tonalpouhqui stands at the edge of the group. He's not officiating tonight. The duty falls to one of the younger priests. His presence here is voluntary, a personal practice of attending the solar transitions at both ends of the day, dawn and dusk. the two moments when the sky is doing the most visible and most significant of its daily work. The sun is perhaps 20 minutes from the horizon. It has entered that transformation that Tonalpouhqui never tires of watching. The white gold of the high day sun giving way to something richer, warmer, more complex in its colour and in what it does to every surface it touches. The white plaster of the temple steps is gold now. The lake surface to the west is copper and rose, the reflected light of a sky that has not yet fully committed to colour, but is moving toward it, steadily, inevitably. The twin volcanoes to the southeast have turned their snowy summits from white to pink. The great city below is gold and shadow, the white buildings catching light, the canals and open water reflecting it, the deep spaces between structures already filling with the soft blue-grey of approaching dusk. From up here, from the height of the temple platform, the city looks complete, whole, a thing that has achieved exactly what it was trying to achieve. The incense rises from the braziers. The young priest speaks the words of the sunset acknowledgement, the formal address to Tonatiuh, the sun thanking him for the day's completed journey, asking for his safe passage through the underworld darkness, trusting in his return in the morning. Tonalpouhqui does not say these words aloud. He says his own version of them, internally, in the private idiom of a long relationship. He has been speaking to the sun daily for decades. The formality has long since dissolved into something more personal, more direct. What remains is genuine, a daily attention, a daily acknowledgement, a daily renewal of the understanding that the sun and the watcher of the sun are in relationship, that the astronomer does not merely observe, he participates. The sun touches the western horizon. It is flattened slightly by atmospheric refraction at the horizon, a known phenomenon, one that Tonalpouhqui has documented carefully in his observing records. The way the sun's disk appears to stretch horizontally as it nears the horizon line, becoming briefly oval rather than round before it sinks below. He watches its final minutes. The colour above the horizon deepens through orange to a red-orange that has warmth and weight to it, a colour you could almost feel as heat if you didn't know it was only light. Above the red-orange, a band of deeper rose, and above that the sky graduates through lavender to violet to the deep blue of altitude already appearing overhead. The first star appears, not Venus tonight. Venus is in its evening star phase and will appear to the west shortly after sunset, but one of the bright stars of the summer sky, holding its position just to the east of south in the deepening blue. And then the sun is gone. Not suddenly, not like an extinguished flame, but completed, its arc finished, its day done, its last thin sliver of light disappearing below the mountains to the west with the same unhurried patience with which it began the morning. For a moment the sky holds the afterglow, that lingering warmth of colour that remains in the west for 20 minutes or more after the sun has set, a memory of the day preserved in the atmosphere, and then, slowly, it fades, and the stars come out. The evening meal in the priestly quarters is the most social hour of Tonalpouhqui's day. The small group of priests who share this section of the temple complex, 6 of them, all senior members of the astronomical college, eat together in the central courtyard in the last of the evening light, seated on low mats around a shared cloth on which the food is arranged. The cook, a middle-aged woman of formidable capability and strong opinions about the correct consistency of tamales, has prepared a meal suited to the cooling evening. A thick bean stew, fragrant with epizalt and dried chili, its surface shimmering with the fat of the black beans, dark and savory. Tamales wrapped in corn husks, opened at the table to release their steam, masa dough filled with a mixture of roasted squash and chili, the corn husk wrapper left on the plate like a small discarded boat. Sliced jicama, the crunchy root that grows in the chinampas, dressed with chili powder and the juice of tomate. Warm cacao, a thick, slightly bitter drink prepared with ground cacao beans, water, and dried chili, drunk from clay cups while it is still warm enough to make your hands comfortable holding the vessel. The conversation is quiet, and these are men who have spent their lives in contemplation and observation. Their evenings are not silent, they are warm, even gently humorous, but the conversation moves at a different pace than the conversation of the marketplace or the workshop. It has the cadence of people who are comfortable with pauses, who do not feel the need to fill every silence, who understand that sometimes the most interesting thought arrives in the moment after one stops speaking, rather than during. Tonight, the conversation drifts to the approaching solstice. One of the older priests, a man named Xochitl, whose eyesight has been failing for 2 years and who relies increasingly on Tonalpouhqui's observations to supplement his own, asks about the Venus position. He wants to know if the morning star heliacal rising will fall before or after the solstice this year. Tonalpouhqui gives him the answer, exact, with the confidence of someone who has just spent the afternoon calculating exactly this. The rising will fall 4 days after the solstice. Xochitl nods. This matters for the timing of a secondary ceremony. He will need to adjust the schedule. The conversation moves on to a student who has been struggling with the eclipse calculations, to a strange atmospheric phenomenon one of the priests observed last week at dawn, to a request from a noble family for a reading of the day sign under which their newborn daughter arrived. Tonalpouhqui listens more than he speaks. This has always been his nature, in groups, to listen, to gather the texture of other people's observations, to notice what they notice, to feel the shape of shared understanding as it develops in conversation. He speaks when he has something to add, and what he adds is usually precise, usually 1 or 2 sentences, usually the thing that makes a complex question suddenly simpler. His colleagues value this. They do not require more words from him than he offers. They know his silences are working silences, not withdrawn ones. After the meal, the cook brings out slices of papaya, orange-fleshed, sweet, soft enough to eat without any utensil, the seeds scooped out with a small spoon. It is the sweetest thing in the meal, and Tonalpouhqui eats it slowly, the way you eat something that is available only in season and will not be available again for months. The sky above the courtyard has fully darkened. The Milky Way is becoming visible, a broad, faint band across the zenith, the texture of it resolving as the eye adjusts to the dark. Tonalpouhqui tilts his head back and looks at it upside down, a habit he developed as a student and never entirely lost. The Milky Way looks different viewed this way, the familiar pattern disrupted, and therefore freshly interesting. Xochitl notices, "You and your upside-down sky," the older priest says. Tonalpouhqui smiles. "It is not an upside-down sky," he says. "It is the same sky, from a different angle. Before the serious observing begins, there is the preparation of the instruments." In the astronomical work of the Aztec priests, the instruments were not what a modern observatory would recognize: no glass lenses, no metal tubes, no clockwork mechanisms for tracking the sky's rotation. The instruments were simpler and more direct, and in their simplicity, more demanding of the observer. The gnomon, a perfectly vertical post set in the exact center of a precisely leveled stone platform. By measuring the length and direction of the gnomon's shadow at specific times of day, the astronomer can determine the sun's position in the sky with great precision, track its annual north-south migration, identify the solstices and equinoxes with accuracy sufficient to calibrate the agricultural calendar. Tonalpouhqui's gnomon is a polished obsidian pillar, black and perfectly reflective, set into a circular stone platform in the center of the upper observation deck. It has been in its position undisturbed for 40 years, set there by his teacher's teacher, maintained with the same care that the temple stonework itself receives. He checks it every week. He checks its vertical alignment with a plumb line of fine cotton thread, weighted with a jade bead. He checks the platform's level by filling a shallow ring carved into the stone around the gnomon's base with water, and watching whether the water surface is even. He checks the orientation marks cut into the stone platform itself, the lines indicating due north and south, east and west, established years ago by the careful observation of the circumpolar stars. Tonight, everything is in order, as it always is. He also uses horizon markers. On the surrounding hills and the distant mountain ridges, specific points have been identified and marked over generations of observation. The spot on the eastern ridge where the sun rises at the winter solstice, the spot where it rises at the summer solstice, the points of the equinox sunrise and the key lunar standstills. These are recorded in the observing books. When Tonalpouhqui watches a sunrise or a star rising, he notes which of these horizon marks it aligns with, building up a record of precise positions that accumulates into a map of the sky's annual movements. The mountains do not move. The stars move slowly. The precession of the equinoxes shifts the background stars by 1 degree roughly every 72 years, a change imperceptible in a single lifetime, but visible across generations of accumulated records. The observing books hold this long view, the slow drift of the stars against the fixed landscape, a movement so gradual that only the patient accumulation of records reveals it. Tonalpouhqui's books go back 4 generations. In them the mountains are fixed, the stars move very slowly. The planets weave their more rapid courses across the background, and the sun and moon trace their annual and monthly arcs with the reliability of breath, always changing, always the same. He sets out his observing mat on the stone floor of the upper platform. He sets out his ink and brushes. He sets out the current observing book, open to tonight's blank page. He sits down. He arranges himself comfortably, back straight enough to maintain alertness through the long hours, but not stiffly straight, not the posture of effort. the posture of someone who intends to remain here for a long time and has made peace with that intention. He looks up. The sky is extraordinary tonight. No moon. The moon is 3 days past new, a thin crescent that set shortly after sunset and is now below the horizon. The sky is at its darkest, the stars at their most numerous, the Milky Way arching overhead in its full, textured, overwhelming presence. He breathes in. He begins to watch. The night has many hours. To the ordinary sleeper, this is simply true. The night is long and sleep moves through it in its own rhythms, cycling between depths and surfaces, dreaming and still. But to the night watcher, to the astronomer who remains awake and present through all those hours, the night reveals itself as a country with its own geography, its own distinct regions and characters. The first hours of the night after sunset and before midnight belong to the evening stars. The summer sky in the Valley of Mexico is dominated by the summer triangle, 3 brilliant stars, each the brightest in its own constellation. Vega in the eagle with its own separate mythology, Deneb in the bird of the Aztec sky, and Altair, the star the Aztec astronomers tracked as one of the key reference points for measuring the positions of planets. Tonalpouhqui notes their positions. He notes the position of Jupiter, a steady, brilliant, yellow-white light, near the southern horizon tonight, brighter than any star, its light slightly warm compared to the blue-white of the hot stars of the summer sky. Jupiter's movement is slow. It takes 12 years to complete one circuit of the zodiacal band, and its position tonight is nearly what it was last month, but not quite. The small shift is real. He measures it against the background stars, estimating the angle with practiced precision, recording the position in his book. The ink dries quickly in the night air. He waits. The sky moves slowly overhead, not fast enough to see in real time, but the cumulative movement of an hour is significant. The stars that were near the eastern horizon when he sat down now well above it, the western stars that were high beginning their descent. He notes the rising of the bright star Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, a red giant so large that if it were placed at the center of our solar system, it would swallow the inner planets, though Tonalpouhqui knows nothing of this. He knows Antares as Tenochtitlán, as one of the key stars of the summer sky, its red color distinguished from the yellow of Jupiter and the blue-white of the hotter stars, a particular quality of light that his eyes have learned to identify immediately, the way you learn to recognize a friend's voice in a crowd. The red star. He has been watching it since he was a student. It rises now above the southeastern hills, clearing the ridge and entering the open sky with its characteristic steady red glow, and he records its rising time, the moment of first visibility above the horizon line, in his book with the same quiet precision with which he has recorded thousands of such risings. The night deepens. Around the second hour after midnight, the sky tilts to show the stars of late summer and early autumn, the sky's winter pantry, the northern constellations beginning their long arc toward the zenith, where they will stand in high winter. The great square of Pegasus rises in the east, the Pleiades, Tenochtitlan, the marketplace, the cluster that the Aztec sky watchers watched more carefully, perhaps, than any other grouping of stars because of its role in the new fire ceremony. The Pleiades rise above the eastern horizon, Tonalpouhqui watches them rise. 7 stars visible to his practiced eye, the cluster's small smudge of collective light, resolving into individual points for someone who knows how to look, who knows to not look directly at the faintest ones, to hold them in the peripheral vision where the sky's faint light is better received. The Pleiades have a particular meaning for him that goes beyond their astronomical utility. He was 12 years old when he first identified all 7 stars in the Pleiades without help. His teacher had set this as a challenge. Most beginning observers see only 6, the 7th being genuinely faint and requiring the specific visual technique that dark-adapted peripheral vision allows. When Tonalpouhqui reported seeing 7, his teacher asked him to point to each one, to hold them individually, to count them again. He counted 7. His teacher was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You will be a fine astronomer." It was the first, and one of the only direct compliments Tonalpouhqui received from this teacher in 15 years of study. He kept it. He has kept it for decades carefully, the way you keep a small object of great personal value, not displayed, not frequently handled, but present, known to be there. He smiles now, looking at the Pleiades. 7. Still 7. The hours between midnight and dawn are the quietest hours, the deepest hours, the hours that belong most completely to the sky and least to anything human. The city below is still, the fires are low, the perpetual fire still burning, but quietly, its orange reflection in the canals reduced to the smallest, most private flicker. The sounds from the lake have ceased entirely. The market boats are still, the canoes pulled up on the banks, the vendors and paddlers and farmers all deep in the sleep that Tonalpouhqui has given up for tonight. He does not feel lonely. This is important to understand about him. The night watch is not a penance, not a sacrifice of sleep that costs him something he would rather have. It is his natural element. He is a person who belongs to the night, the way a bird of the high mountain belongs to thin air, not despite the difficulty, but because the particular quality of the difficulty matches some quality in him. The quietness of the deep night, the solitude of the high platform, the vast impersonal presence of the sky, these things do not diminish him, they expand him. In the night, alone with the stars, he becomes larger than himself in some way he has never been able to precisely explain, even to himself. He becomes part of the watching rather than the watcher. The distinction dissolves. And there is something in that dissolution, something peaceful, something that does not require a name. He breathes. The sky turns. The stars go about their ancient business. The sky in the east begins to change. It is the moment he has been watching for, and watching for it does not make it less extraordinary. It never does. This is one of the things he has been trying for 20 years of teaching to communicate to his students, that familiarity does not diminish wonder, that wonder is not the product of novelty, that you can watch the same thing 10,000 times and still find it inexhaustible if you come to it with genuine attention each time. Inexhaustible. That is the word he uses with his students when they ask him how he can watch the sky every night for decades without becoming bored. Inexhaustible. The sky is inexhaustible. It is performing the same show, broadly, that it performed last night and the night before, and on every night of his life and every night of his civilization's existence and every night since the first human eyes turned upward in this valley and saw stars. But it is not the same show. The planets have moved. The seasons have shifted the background stars by a fraction of a degree. The particular combination of tonight, this moon phase, this planetary arrangement, this quality of the air and the atmospheric transparency has never occurred before and will never occur again. Every night is unprecedented. Every dawn is the first of its kind. The rose of earliest dawn appears above the eastern ridge. Venus is there again, the morning star, returned from the east, where it appeared as an evening star not many months ago, now completing the transformation that Tonalpouhqui has been recording in his tables. The Lord of the House of Dawn, holding his position in the lightening sky with characteristic brilliance, unwilling to yield to the advancing light until the sun itself is very close. Tonalpouhqui makes his final notes for the night. Venus position, Jupiter position near the western horizon, the time of rising of 3 reference stars. The general atmospheric conditions, the transparency, the steadiness of the images, whether any stars showed unusual color or flickering that might indicate high-altitude moisture in the air. The wind direction, which has been gentle and northerly all night. The temperature, estimated by long practice from the way the cold feels against his face and hands. He closes the amoxtli. He sets down his brush. He looks at his hands for a moment, the ink-stained right hand that has recorded decades of skies, the plain left hand that has steadied the bark paper through thousands of observing sessions, the hands of a person whose work has been done mostly in the dark and mostly in silence, and has consisted fundamentally of paying attention. He is tired, not deeply tired, not the tired of someone whose body has been badly used, but pleasantly, solidly tired in the way that follows a long night of quiet work. The kind of tired that makes the thought of his sleeping mat and his cotton blanket feel like a luxury. The sky is brightening steadily now. The stars are fading one by one, the fainter ones first, slipping below the advancing light of the pre-dawn, then the brighter ones, then even the summer stars that held through the deep night, yielding at last to the coming sun. Venus alone remains. He watches it. The sky around it has brightened to a pale, luminous blue-grey, the colour of high, thin cloud, the colour of early morning over water, the colour of a world that is fully committed to becoming day, and is completing the commitment gracefully. Venus holds. And then, faint now against the brightening sky, but still there if you know where to look, still visible to practiced eyes, Venus holds and holds and holds and fades. Not gone, just no longer visible in this light, still there above the horizon, moving on its appointed path, but released for now from the work of being seen. The sky is full of light. Tonalpouhqui stands. He stretches slowly, reaching upward with both arms, feeling the long night of stillness release from his back and shoulders. He rolls his neck gently. He stamps his feet once, twice, against the stone of the platform, feeling the solidity of it. He is standing where he stood yesterday, at this hour, and the day before, and the one before that. And for decades of days before those, He is standing at the highest point of the city, at the threshold between night and day, with the sky brightening around him and the city below just beginning to stir, and he feels, as he always feels at this moment, that everything is in order. The stars have completed their transit. The sky has kept its word. The day is about to begin. He picks up his instruments, folds his mat, tucks the observation book under his arm. He takes one last look at the eastern sky, the rose and gold deepening at the horizon, the mountains beginning to show their familiar silhouettes against the warmth of the coming sun. He bows his head. Thank you. And he descends the temple steps, stepping carefully, one foot precisely placed before the other, down through the early morning air, toward the sound of the fountain and the smell of the breakfast fire, beginning in the courtyard kitchen, and the world continuing. As it always continues, as it always will, he sleeps again in the late morning. The city is fully awake by the time his head touches the sleeping mat, the canals busy, the market in full voice, the school students reciting their lessons somewhere in the colonnade across the courtyard. A sound that is part of the fabric of this place, the way birdsong is part of the fabric of the lake shore. He does not hear any of it. He's already gone, down into the deep, structureless rest that his body has learned to find immediately. The rest of a person who has no ambivalence about sleep, who doesn't lie awake reviewing the day or worrying about the morning, who has made peace with the practice of rest as completely as with the practice of watching. His dreams, if he dreams, are not about the sky. They never have been. His days and nights are the sky. His dreams are other things entirely, the face of someone he knew as a child, the smell of the countryside outside the city, where he walked once with his teacher in the dry season and they found a field of wild marigolds stretching to the horizon, orange and gold in the afternoon light. The smell of them so strong it was almost sound. Small things, human-sized things. His life is large, cosmic, in the literal sense, oriented toward the cosmos. But the things that come to him in sleep are small, specific, personal, the texture of bark paper under his fingers, the sound of the courtyard fountain, the taste of atole on a cold morning. He sleeps. The city goes about its extraordinary ordinary business around him. The sun makes its arc across the highland sky. And when he wakes in the afternoon, he will sit up slowly and stretch and listen to the fountain for a moment and feel the particular quality of the late afternoon light through the window, and know from the light's angle and colour, from the sounds of the city, from the smell of the air, exactly where in the day he is. He always knows where in the day he is. He always knows where in the year. He always knows, looking up at any point in the night sky, where in the great turning of the cosmos the earth stands. This is his gift and his practice and his life's work. To know where things are, to hold the place, to ensure that the count continues, that the days are numbered correctly, that the ceremonies fall in their proper positions, that the sky and the calendar remain in conversation, that the world does not lose its place in time. This is what the astronomer-priest does. This is why he watches, not only for knowledge, though the knowledge is extraordinary, not only for power, though the knowledge confers a kind of power, but for continuity, for the assurance that the cycles proceed, that the sun rises, that Venus returns, that the Pleiades cross the midnight sky at their appointed season, and the new fire can be kindled, and the world can begin again. He watches so that the world can begin again, and the world, in its patient way, continues to do exactly that. Let your breath become very slow. Your body is heavy and warm and held. The sound of the fountain in the astronomer's courtyard is very far away now, but it is there, if you listen for it. That soft, continuous voice. Water speaking to stone, stone speaking back. The oldest conversation in the world. Tonalpouhqui is sleeping. He is sleeping deeply on his woven mat under his cotton blanket, in his room with a trapezoidal window that frames a small square of the afternoon sky. The city breathes around him. The lake holds the city on its dark surface. The volcanoes stand at the horizon, patient and enormous, watching the day proceed. He will wake in a few hours. He will eat. He will teach. He will walk by the canal and watch the water. And when the sun sets tonight, he will climb the temple steps again and take his position on the observation platform, his mat and his instruments and his open book arranged exactly as they always are. And he will watch the sky begin to darken and the first stars appear. And he will feel, as he always feels, the particular peace that comes from doing exactly the thing you were made to do, from paying the attention that is yours to pay, from taking your place in the great continuing record of the sky. You carry something of this with you tonight, something of his patience, his long practice of attention, his understanding that to watch one thing, one sky, one mountain, one canal in the afternoon light, with genuine presence and genuine care, is not a small thing, is perhaps the largest thing a person can do. To be here, to see what is here, to take one's turn in the long human watch. The stars above you tonight, wherever you are, whatever roof or sky is above you, are the same stars that Tonalpouhqui watched from his temple platform. They have moved slightly in the centuries since, the slow procession of the equinoxes shifting the sky by a few degrees, but they are the same stars, the same ancient light, the same inexhaustible sky. Somewhere tonight, someone is watching them. An astronomer on a mountain, professional and precise. A child at a window, still and wondering. A traveller stopped in a dark field, overwhelmed. A grandmother sitting on a porch in a place where the city lights have not yet reached the sky. They are all keeping the watch, as Tonalpouhqui kept it, as his teachers kept it, as the first human being who ever looked up and felt the sky was answering kept it. You are part of that long line tonight. Even here, even in rest, even drifting towards sleep, you are part of it. The watch continues. The sky continues. The count of days goes on, one careful breath at a time. And you can rest now in the knowledge that the count is in good hands, that the sky is being watched, that somewhere, always, there is someone who has climbed to a high place and is sitting very still with a book and a brush and their eyes open, measuring the patient movements of light, keeping the world's place in time. Breathe in and out. The Milky Way turns above the Valley of Mexico. The perpetual fire burns, the fountain speaks, and the keeper of the night sky sleeps, briefly in the warmth of the afternoon. As do you. Good night.